Welcome back, guys, to MysteryCon. On this channel I narrate conspiracy theories to help you sleep and relax. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe, and also share this video with your friends and family to help them fall asleep too. Please let me know where you're watching this from and what time it is for you. Now sit back, relax, and let's begin. The first time I intercepted the transmission, I thought I was losing my mind. It was late, 2:30 a.m., the usual graveyard shift when nothing ever happens. The static on the old radio was as dull and monotonous as ever, a low hum filling the air. I had been staring at the blinking green lights of the equipment, my fingers mechanically flipping through the dials and buttons, as I always did. The place smelled faintly of stale coffee and dust, a far cry from the excitement I'd imagined when I first took this job. Then, amidst the usual hum of frequencies, something shifted. A crackling noise broke through the static, sharp and jagged like broken glass. I paused, my fingers hovering over the control panel, wondering if it was a malfunction. But then the sound cleared up, and I could hear someone speaking. "Help! Earth, destruction! It's already too late!" The voice was faint, distant, and distorted, but it was undeniably human. My heart skipped a beat, the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. I quickly reached for the volume dial, cranking it up. "Who is this? Where are you?" I muttered to myself, almost too afraid to ask. But the transmission didn't answer me directly. Instead, a series of cryptic phrases followed. "War, time, it's coming, save humanity." I leaned forward, squinting at the radio equipment. The frequency wasn't one I had ever seen before. And it wasn't a pre-recorded message. This was happening in real time, like someone was speaking directly to me. I froze, my mind racing. I'd been working at this radio station for 5 years, listening to the endless hum of waves and signals, but never had anything like this happened. The voice wasn't local. It wasn't even from this time, I realized. The words, though garbled, carried a sense of urgency that chilled me. I tried to grab a pen to jot down some of what I was hearing, but the words were too fast, and the static too overwhelming. Frustration built within me, and I felt the gnawing fear that I wasn't ready for whatever this was. The voice was saying something else now, something I barely caught before the transmission abruptly cut off. It was like the air went still, like everything had just stopped. I stared at the radio in disbelief. I checked the time, my pulse hammering in my chest. It was the same time as before. But it didn't feel the same. It felt like something had shifted. I quickly checked the equipment. Everything seemed fine. No errors. Nothing out of the ordinary. But I knew in my gut that this wasn't normal. I knew I had to figure out what was happening. But I also knew that whatever this was, it was bigger than anything I'd ever encountered. And I had a feeling I was just starting to scratch the surface. As I sat there, trying to steady my breathing, I couldn't shake the feeling that the transmission wasn't just a random signal. Whoever, or whatever, was sending it wasn't just reaching across space. They were reaching across time. And that thought terrified me. I couldn't stop thinking about the transmission. The cryptic words echoed in my mind long after I left the station. Save humanity, time, war. It wasn't just a fluke. That voice, whoever it was, had reached across some boundary, and it wasn't done yet. I had to know more. The next day, I returned to the station early, my heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and dread. I needed to find the frequency again. There had to be something in the static, some hidden code or pattern I could latch onto. I sat down at the controls and started scanning the airwaves, a process I'd done 1,000 times before. But today felt different. My fingers moved quicker, more methodical, almost like they knew what to do without me thinking. I wasn't just listening for random chatter anymore. I was listening for something important. And then, as if it were fate, the static came again, familiar but now more urgent. The same distorted voice crackled through. Not much time. It's already happening. I leaned forward, my palms sweating. The voice sounded more strained this time, like the speaker was struggling to get the words out. I held my breath, hoping for clarity, but the transmission skipped and garbled as it had before. This wasn't random. Whoever was on the other end was trying to get through to me, and I had to decode the message before it was too late. I reached for the old analog recorder beside me, a tool I hadn't used in years. With one hand, I marked down the time and the frequency on the recording pad, while the other manipulated the dials and buttons. The voice continued, and this time, I could hear the words more clearly. Time manipulation, coming, destruction. I frowned. Time manipulation? Could it be real? Was this even possible? My mind raced through every theory I had ever read or heard about, from quantum physics to time travel paradoxes. But nothing seemed to fit. The voice had been too real, too human. Then, something caught my eye. Amidst the static, there was a pattern in the noise, almost like a code. I froze, my heart skipping a beat as I realized I was hearing something encoded in the transmission, buried beneath the chaos. A sequence of numbers. 03129418. I quickly scribbled it down, my mind racing. It wasn't random. It had to mean something. I ran my fingers over the numbers, looking for any connections. Could they be a date? A time? A phone number? But nothing was coming to mind. Frustration clawed at me, but then an idea sparked. I ran the number through an online database, one I had access to through the station's old equipment, hoping for a hit. At first, nothing. Then a match. The numbers corresponded to an old, obscure file buried deep in government archives. It wasn't classified, but it was flagged as highly sensitive, and access to it had been restricted for decades. I couldn't believe my eyes. This wasn't a coincidence. Whoever, or whatever, was sending these transmissions had pointed me directly to this file. I had no idea what was in it, but I knew it wasn't good. The file, titled Project Kronos, was related to time manipulation experiments conducted during the Cold War. The more I read, the clearer it became. Time travel wasn't just a theory. It had been tested, and the government had buried the evidence. The transmissions weren't just a warning, they were a call for help from a future that had already experienced the consequences of these experiments. I had a choice to make. The more I learned, the more dangerous this became. Someone didn't want this information getting out. I could already feel eyes on me, watching my every move. My heart raced as I realized I had uncovered something huge. Something that could change everything. But I couldn't stop now. The truth was out there, and I needed to find it, no matter the cost. As I sat in the dimly lit station, the weight of the discovery pressing down on me, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being hunted. Someone, or something, was making sure I wouldn't reach the end of this mystery. And I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep going before it all caught up to me. I knew I wasn't alone in this anymore. The more I dug into Project Kronos, the more I felt the weight of someone watching me, waiting for me to slip up. It wasn't paranoia. Something was out there, lurking in the shadows. And I could feel it closing in. I couldn't keep this to myself anymore. I needed help. But who could I trust? The more I thought about it, the more I realized how isolated I was. My friends? They wouldn't believe me. And even if they did, they wouldn't understand what was at stake. My colleagues? They were all too caught up in their routine work to notice anything amiss. No, if I was going to figure this out, I'd have to do it alone. But as I started digging deeper, more signs of interference began to appear. It started small. A message left on my workstation at the radio station. Stop looking. Simple. Direct. But chilling. It could have been a prank, but the timing was too precise, too deliberate. Someone had been inside the station. Someone had been watching me. I ignored it. But the warnings kept coming. My phone line started cutting out whenever I tried to reach out to certain contacts. My email inbox? Full of junk, but no replies to my inquiries about the Project Kronos file. And when I went to check the station's archives for any more related materials, I found the access logs had been tampered with. It wasn't just a coincidence. Someone was actively covering their tracks, making sure I wouldn't find what I was looking for. But that only made me more determined to keep going. Then, one night, it got worse. I was at the station again, running through some old files on Kronos, when I heard a strange noise coming from the hallway. A faint thud. Then another. Someone was outside, moving quietly. I grabbed the flashlight from my desk, my heart pounding in my chest. I wasn't going to confront whoever was out there, not yet. But I had to know who it was. I crept down the narrow hallway, the flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The sound stopped when I reached the main entrance. I stood there, waiting for a minute that felt like an eternity, listening for any sign of movement. But nothing. I turned around to go back inside, and that's when I saw him. A man in a dark suit, standing at the end of the hallway. His face was partially hidden by the dim light, but there was no mistaking his calm, predatory stance. "You're looking in the wrong place," he said, his voice smooth and cold, the kind of voice that made your blood run cold. I froze. He was right. I was looking in the wrong place. But I didn't know what I was supposed to be looking for yet. The man took a step forward, his shoes making no sound against the floor. "I'm warning you," he said. "Leave this alone. It's bigger than you." I backed away, my mind racing. Who was this guy? What did he know about the transmissions, about the time manipulation? Was he part of the covert group I'd been reading about? "You don't want to get involved in something that could ruin you," he continued, his voice almost sympathetic now, as if he genuinely cared. But I could see through the lie. This man was dangerous. I didn't say anything. Instead, I turned and bolted down the hallway, my breath coming in short gasps. But I wasn't sure if I was running away from him or running toward the truth. Because the more I saw, the more I knew this wasn't just some secret organization trying to keep the truth from the world. This was something far darker. As I reached the door to the outside, I stopped, glancing back at the shadowy figure in the hallway. He was still there, watching me. He didn't move, didn't try to stop me. It was like he was letting me go, letting me continue my investigation, knowing that sooner or later, I'd stumble upon something I couldn't undo. "Remember," he called out as I opened the door. "Time waits for no one." I didn't know if it was a threat or a warning. But it didn't matter. I knew one thing for sure now. I was not alone in this. And whoever these people were, they were willing to kill to protect their secrets. The encounter with the man in the dark suit rattled me more than I wanted to admit. It wasn't just the confrontation. It was the realization that this wasn't a one-man operation. The truth was far bigger than I could have imagined. Someone, maybe a whole network of people, was going to great lengths to prevent me from uncovering what was hidden in the depths of Project Kronos. But the more they tried to push me back, the more determined I became. I had to get to the bottom of this. I spent the next few days combing through every piece of data I could find. The government archives, the research reports, anything connected to time manipulation, Kronos, or the catastrophe that future me had warned me about. But every lead felt like a dead end, like someone was always one step ahead, covering their tracks. I wasn't just dealing with a conspiracy anymore. I was fighting against a force that seemed to anticipate my every move. But then, late one night, something changed. I received an encrypted email. At first, I thought it was just more junk. But there was something about it that caught my eye. The subject line was simple. "You're close, but not far enough." The sender's address was untraceable, just a string of random letters and numbers. Whoever it was, they knew I was onto something. I opened the email cautiously, my heart racing. Inside was a link, one I almost didn't want to click. But I had no choice. I clicked it. The page that loaded was bare, except for a single line of text. Meet me at the old pier. Midnight. Bring the files. It was vague, and it was risky. But this was the break I had been waiting for. That night, I gathered all the documents I could find that tied the government to Project Kronos. I had a sinking feeling in my gut as I stuffed them into a duffel bag. The whole thing felt like a setup, but I couldn't turn back now. If this was a trap, then maybe it would lead me to the answers I was desperate to find. When I arrived at the pier, the chill of the night air hit me first. The docks were empty, save for the distant sound of waves crashing against the wooden posts. The moon was full, casting long shadows across the water. I stood there for a few moments, checking my watch. It was exactly midnight. I turned around slowly, scanning the darkness. And that's when I saw him, the man in the dark suit. He was standing by an old, rusted boat near the edge of the pier. He hadn't moved since I arrived. His hands were tucked into the pockets of his jacket, his face hidden in the shadows. "You came," he said, his voice calm, almost amused. "I came for answers," I replied, my voice steady despite the pounding in my chest. The man didn't respond right away. Instead, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small, sealed envelope. He handed it to me without a word, and I took it reluctantly. "Open it," he said. I hesitated for a moment before tearing the envelope open. Inside was a single photograph. It showed a group of people standing around a large machine, wires and monitors surrounding them. The machine was massive, old, like something out of a science fiction film. But what struck me most was the man standing at the center of the group. It was me. The photo was grainy, taken years ago, but there was no mistaking it. The man in the center was me, my younger self. I stared at the photo in disbelief, the air suddenly thick with tension. "What the hell is this?" I muttered. "How is this even possible?" The man's face softened, his expression unreadable. "That's the beginning. That machine is Project Kronos, the source of all this. And you're the one who's going to stop it." I felt a rush of confusion and fear. "Stop it? But what is this? How am I involved?" He took a slow step forward, his face now illuminated by the moonlight. "You don't remember, do you? You were part of the original project. You yourself were the one who activated the machine." He paused, watching my reaction carefully. "And now you're here, trying to stop what you set in motion." I stared at him, my mind reeling. "No. That's impossible. I never—" "You did," he interrupted, his tone low and serious. "But the truth is you failed. The machine, it created the future you've been hearing in the transmissions. The future you've been trying to prevent." I felt my stomach drop. My hands shook as I gripped the photo tighter, the weight of the revelation crashing down on me. I had started this. I had created the disaster I was trying to stop. And now, I was racing against time, trying to undo something that couldn't be undone. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Why now?" The man's expression remained unreadable. "Because no matter what you do, it's already happening. And you're not the only one who's been trying to stop it." Before I could respond, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows. I was left standing there, holding the photo, the weight of his words sinking in. I had to stop the machine. But first, I had to figure out why I had ever activated it in the first place. And more importantly, how I could stop it now, before it was too late. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? The photograph haunted me, the revelation gnawing at the edges of my mind. I had activated the machine. But why? Why would I, knowing what I knew now, have started this catastrophe. I went back to the station the next day, feeling like I was walking through a fog. I couldn't focus, couldn't think clearly. The man in the suit had made it clear that the truth was even darker than I had imagined, but he hadn't told me why. I had to find out more about Project Kronos, and about my involvement in it. I had to understand how a version of me from the past could be responsible for the disaster that was unfolding. I dove into the files again. Every night, I spent hours at the station, scouring through the encrypted data, reading research papers, and examining every scrap of evidence. But it was like trying to put together a puzzle without all the pieces. I had the photo. I had the timeline. But the truth, the real truth, it was still just out of reach. Then I found it. A video file hidden deep in the archives, one that wasn't listed in any of the official records. The file was encrypted, but I had come to learn a few tricks to get past the security. The moment I hit play, I could feel the hair on the back of my neck stand up. This wasn't just a video, it was a confession. The screen flickered to life, showing a lab filled with high-tech equipment. In the center of the room stood the massive machine I had seen in the photograph, its metal surface gleaming ominously under the harsh fluorescent lights. There were people moving around, preparing for something. Among them, I spotted myself. My younger self. I couldn't believe it. This was it. This was the moment. The camera zoomed in on me, and I watched, frozen, as I moved forward to the machine, my hand poised above a control panel. A voice off camera spoke. "Are you sure about this, Dr. Stoy? Once it's activated, there's no going back." I felt my chest tighten. This wasn't a dream. This wasn't some old, distant memory. It was me in that room, looking just as confused as I was now. I watched as my younger self hesitated for a moment, his finger trembling above the button. Then, with a deep breath, he pressed it. The machine hummed to life. Bright lights filled the room, and the atmosphere shifted, becoming thick with tension. The screen went black. I sat there, stunned, the weight of the moment crashing over me. I had activated the machine. But why? What had I been thinking? What had made me do it? The answer came a few seconds later, in the form of a brief text message that popped up on the screen. "Time's already fractured. We can't undo it. But we can try to fix it." My younger self's voice echoed through the recording. "We can't undo it, but we can try to fix it." I leaned forward, my hands trembling as I rewound the video. I had to hear it again. "We can't undo it, but we can try to fix it." What did that mean? Why would I say something like that? I paused the video, staring at the frozen frame of myself, younger but somehow wiser, standing next to the machine. I'd made a mistake. I'd made the mistake of thinking I could control time. And now, I was trying to fix it. But was it too late? Suddenly, the weight of it all hit me. This wasn't just about stopping a disaster. This wasn't just about reversing time. This was about something deeper. Something far more sinister. The machine had done something to me, to everyone who was involved with it. It had fractured time, altered reality itself. I had activated it because I believed I could fix everything. But the message in the video, the desperation in my younger self's voice, told a different story. There was no fixing this. There was no going back. I felt my pulse quicken. The machine had set something irreversible in motion. And now, I was left with the aftermath of my own actions. I glanced at the clock. It was getting late, and the weight of what I had uncovered was sinking in. But I couldn't stop now. I couldn't stop until I found out the truth. Until I knew exactly what had happened to make me do this in the first place. But as I stared at the video once more, I realized something else. The transmissions, the warnings, they hadn't just been a cry for help. They were a message. A warning about me. About the future version of myself, someone who had already failed. And that was the most chilling part of all. I couldn't ignore the dread that settled in my stomach the moment I finished watching that video. My younger self had activated Project Kronos, but the message, "We can't undo it, but we can try to fix it," had left me with more questions than answers. How had I reached this point? What had driven me to make such a reckless decision? The weight of the situation hit me hard. The catastrophic event that future me warned about wasn't something in the distant future anymore. It was imminent. Time was no longer something I could take for granted. If I was going to stop the disaster, I needed to act fast. But the more I looked into the machine, the more I realized how much I didn't understand. Time manipulation wasn't just about shifting moments around like a puzzle. The machine wasn't built for what I thought it was. Its purpose, its true purpose, was far more complex than anything I had anticipated. The strange part was that every lead I followed only seemed to raise the stakes. I discovered another encrypted file, this one detailing a second experiment, a test run, so to speak, where the machine had been activated multiple times. Each activation had destabilized the flow of time in different ways. People had vanished, events had shifted, and the fabric of reality itself had started to tear apart. And I was part of it. As the realization set in, I began to feel the pressure. I couldn't undo what had been done, but there was still a chance to stop it from spiraling completely out of control. But I wasn't just racing against time. I was racing against those who were determined to keep this all buried. I wasn't safe. That became clearer every day. My once calm and predictable life had been shattered. Strange things started happening at the station, disruptions, glitches in the system, inexplicable power outages. I was starting to feel like someone, or something, was actively working against me, sabotaging my efforts at every turn. It was like they knew exactly where I was looking, what I was uncovering. One night, as I reviewed more of the Kronos project data, I received an anonymous message on my secure line. The sender's ID was untraceable, but the message was clear. "You've seen too much. You're a threat." I didn't know who was behind it. I didn't care. All I knew was that I had to move quickly. I copied all the essential files I had gathered, including the transmission codes, the video from the archives, and the research into the machine's true purpose. It was time to take the fight to them, the people who had hidden this conspiracy for so long. The next day, I reached out to an old colleague, Dr. Ellis Carter. He had been involved in the Kronos project before it was shut down, and while he had distanced himself from it, I hoped he would know something more, something I hadn't found in the data I had. I had to meet him in person. The encrypted messages, the files, everything was becoming too much to handle alone. We agreed to meet at a local diner at midnight, a place that had once been our favorite when we worked together. I didn't know if I could trust him completely, but he was the only person left I could turn to. I needed an ally. But when I arrived, things didn't go as planned. The diner was dark, except for a single flickering light above the booth we used to sit in. Ellis wasn't there. I sat down, nervous, glancing around. A minute passed, then 5. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Someone was watching me. Suddenly, the door swung open, and a figure stepped inside. It wasn't Ellis. It was a man in a dark suit, again. The same man who had warned me at the pier. He was flanked by 2 others, and they were all staring straight at me. "Dr. Stoy," the man said coldly, his voice laced with threat. "I think it's time you stopped playing this game." I stood up, heart racing. I knew I couldn't outrun them, not here. Not now. "You don't understand what you're dealing with," I said, trying to buy time. "I know what you've been hiding. I know what you did to me." The man in the suit didn't flinch. "You've been warned." His voice was calm, almost detached, like he wasn't even bothered by the fact that I had uncovered their secrets. "But you're running out of time. We've already decided how this ends." Before I could react, one of the men moved quickly, pulling something from his jacket. A gun. I froze. The situation was escalating. The man in the suit stepped forward. You're too deep in this now. You can't stop what's coming. But you can stop yourself from making it worse. A chill ran down my spine. They were here to silence me, to bury the truth once and for all. I couldn't let that happen. The world was on the verge of a catastrophe, and I was the only one who could stop it. But could I? I couldn't breathe. The gun in the man's hand gleamed coldly under the diner's dim light, and my heart raced as panic surged through me. For a moment, I was paralyzed, frozen in place, unsure of how to move, unsure of how I had gotten myself into this situation. I had always been the one in control, but now, it seemed the walls were closing in. The man in the suit took another step forward, his gaze locked on me, calculating. You've uncovered too much. Now you're a liability. I knew what this meant. They were going to kill me. I could feel it in the air, thick and heavy with inevitability. But even as the reality of the situation hit me, something inside me snapped. I couldn't die like this. Not now. Not when I had so much left to uncover, so much still to stop. I knew I had to act, and I had to do it fast. I reached under the table, feeling for the small, concealed weapon I had hidden there earlier. A precaution, something I never thought I'd need but was starting to be grateful for. My fingers brushed against the cold metal of the gun, and I gripped it tight, trying to steady my breathing. You're making a mistake, I said, my voice shaky but firm. You think you've won. But you haven't. Not yet. The man raised an eyebrow. You really think you can change this? I didn't answer. I didn't have time for words. I needed action. In one fluid motion, I pulled the gun from beneath the table and pointed it at the man. The two men flanking him hesitated, their eyes flicking from me to their leader. The air was thick with tension. For a moment, it was like time stood still, the world holding its breath. But then, a voice spoke from behind me, one that I recognized. Ellis. Put the gun down, Alex, Ellis said, his voice low, urgent. I spun around, my pulse racing. Ellis stood in the doorway, his face pale and strained, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. Don't do it, he said. You don't know who you're dealing with. I felt my blood run cold. Betrayal. The word hit me like a punch to the gut. Ellis, I whispered, the gun still aimed at the man in the suit. What are you talking about? You're with them? Ellis nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving mine. I had no choice. They have something on me, Alex. They've been controlling me for years. The words cut through me like a blade. Ellis, my last ally, the person I thought I could trust, had been working with the very people trying to stop me. Everything we had worked on together, every step I had taken to uncover the truth, it had all been manipulated, orchestrated by him. I could feel my grip on the gun tighten. Betrayal. It burned in my chest, hot and sharp. I wanted to pull the trigger, to take back control, but something inside me stopped. Maybe it was the way Ellis looked at me, like he was already defeated. Maybe it was the way he seemed to have aged in those few moments, the weight of guilt pressing down on him. You don't have to do this, Ellis said quietly. They've been watching you. I've been watching you. But you're not going to win. You can't undo this. The future's already set. I could see it in his eyes, fear. Fear that he had already done too much, that he had already gone too far to turn back. But it wasn't just fear of me. It was fear of them. The people who controlled everything, who had orchestrated this mess. You lied to me, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. You told me we were on the same side. You were working against me this whole time. Ellis didn't answer. Instead, he took a step back slowly, as if trying to put some distance between us. I glanced at the man in the suit, his expression unchanged. He knew. He was in control. Ellis was nothing but a pawn. In a moment of clarity, I knew what had to be done. I couldn't let myself be a pawn, too. I couldn't let them win. "Step away from him," I said to Ellis, keeping the gun steady in my hand. "Now." Ellis hesitated, but he didn't move. He was caught between two forces, his loyalty to them, and the remnants of whatever was left of his loyalty to me. The tension in the room was unbearable. Time seemed to stretch, and I could almost feel the weight of every decision I had made up until now, pressing down on me. "Ellis," I said again, my voice firm. "Step away." Finally he did. Slowly, he backed up until he was standing by the door. The man in the suit didn't move. He seemed to understand what was happening. "You don't have much time," Ellis muttered, his eyes filled with regret. "They'll come for you. They'll come for all of us." I didn't reply. Instead, I turned and walked toward the door, keeping the gun trained on the man in the suit. As I stepped out into the cold night air, I knew this was just the beginning. The betrayal was bitter, but it was a necessary lesson. I was no longer alone in this fight. But now, I had to take down Ellis's masters. I had to expose the truth before it was too late. And I couldn't afford to trust anyone again. The betrayal still burned. I couldn't escape the memory of Ellis's face, his quiet confession echoing in my mind. He'd been working with them all along, they being the shadowy figures behind Project Kronos, the ones manipulating time and reality. But what had started as a conspiracy had now become a personal vendetta. I wasn't just trying to stop a global catastrophe anymore. I was hunting the people who had ruined everything. With the heavy weight of that betrayal pressing on me, I moved fast. I couldn't afford to waste time. The clock was ticking, and every second brought me closer to a future I wasn't sure I could avoid. I revisited the lab where Project Kronos had originally been housed, the same place in the footage from the video. It was abandoned now, empty and silent, but there was still something about it that made my skin crawl. The walls seemed to breathe with the history of what had been done here. The power of the machine still lingered, even if it wasn't running anymore. I could feel it in the air, thick and suffocating. I was on the verge of something monumental. If I could just unlock the final pieces of the puzzle, I could understand how this mess, this broken timeline, could be undone. The old files I'd gathered from the archives were scattered across the table before me. I pored over them, piecing together fragments of research, hastily scribbled notes, and vague references to the machine's potential to manipulate reality itself. It had been designed as a tool, yes, but it had evolved, become something more than anyone had originally intended. I dug deeper, hoping to find something that would tell me how to reverse the damage that had already been done. The more I read, the clearer it became. The experiment had gone wrong, terribly wrong, and every attempt to fix it had only made things worse. Time, once tampered with, couldn't be restored. It had been fractured beyond repair. But there had to be a way to stop it from consuming everything. If the machine could tear apart time, could it also be used to mend it? I flipped through more notes, my eyes scanning every word. And then, buried in a final, hidden corner of the file, I found it. A sequence of coordinates. A map. The last known location of Kronos' true source. My pulse quickened. This was it. This was the final clue I needed. If I could find this location, I could access the core of the machine. But as I traced the coordinates, something hit me. The place wasn't far from where I had first encountered the man in the suit. The pier. The one where I had almost been killed. It wasn't just a coincidence. It was a setup. I sat back, the realization crashing down on me. They had been leading me here. All along. They had been guiding me to this point, knowing that I would uncover the truth. And now, they were counting on me to make the wrong move. I grabbed my jacket and headed out, the weight of the truth settling heavily on my shoulders. The pieces of the puzzle had finally come together, but the picture wasn't what I expected. I wasn't just racing to stop a catastrophe anymore. I was racing against the very people who had caused it. As I made my way to the coordinates, my mind raced. What would I find there? Would I find the answers I needed, or was I walking into a trap? I wasn't sure. But I had no choice. I had to go. The streets were empty as I walked, the only sound the quick rhythm of my footsteps. The chill in the air felt sharper now, more pressing. I couldn't help but feel like I was being watched. Every corner seemed to conceal danger, every shadow hiding an unknown threat. And then I saw it, the abandoned building at the end of the street. The one that matched the coordinates perfectly. I approached cautiously, checking my surroundings. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of my own breathing. I stepped inside, the door creaking open with a low groan. Inside, it was dark, the only light coming from the pale moon outside. I moved carefully, my eyes adjusting to the dimness. As I made my way through the empty halls, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into the heart of the storm. The source of everything. The place where it all began. And then I heard it. The hum. It was faint at first, barely audible, but it grew louder the deeper I went into the building. A low, almost imperceptible vibration that seemed to come from the walls themselves. I followed the sound, heart pounding, until I came to a large metal door at the end of the hallway. The hum was louder now, vibrating through my body, making it impossible to ignore. I took a deep breath, my hand trembling as I reached for the handle. I wasn't sure what I would find on the other side, but I had come this far. I couldn't turn back now. With a sharp turn of the handle, the door swung open. Inside was the machine, Kronos. The core. The heart of it all. It was still dormant, but I could feel the power emanating from it. I knew deep down that it was waiting. Waiting for me to make my move. The machine loomed in front of me, its cold metal surface reflecting the dim light of the room. It was eerily still, almost waiting for me to make the first move, to wake it from its dormant state. The hum I had heard before still lingered in the air, a reminder that whatever had been done here, whatever had been unleashed, couldn't be ignored. Not anymore. I stepped closer to it, my every step deliberate, calculating. This was the moment. The one where everything I'd uncovered would finally come together. All the broken pieces of the puzzle, all the betrayals, the lies, everything had led me here. To this machine, this source of time manipulation, and to the men behind it all. But what was I supposed to do? How could I stop something so powerful, so deeply ingrained in the fabric of the world? I could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on me. The clock was ticking. If I didn't act, everything I'd learned, everything I'd sacrificed, would be for nothing. I turned around, scanning the dark room, my senses on high alert. I had expected to be alone, but the silence felt wrong now. The door behind me creaked, and I tensed, immediately reaching for the gun at my side. It was Ellis. He stepped into the room, his face drawn, eyes shadowed with regret. He wasn't alone. Behind him stood the same man in the suit, and two others, his accomplices. The ones who had been watching me all along, manipulating me into this moment. Ellis looked at me, his expression unreadable. "You shouldn't be here, Alex," he said quietly. "You're in over your head." I didn't lower my gun. "You've been part of this all along, Ellis," I shot back, my voice tight with anger and disbelief. "You've been working with them, helping them cover this up. Why? Why the hell didn't you tell me the truth?" Ellis glanced at the men behind him, their cold stares making it clear that he was not in control anymore. "I had no choice. You don't understand, Alex. This isn't just about Kronos, it's about something much bigger. This project. It was never meant to be stopped. It was always meant to be a part of the plan." I shook my head, the words feeling like poison in my ears. "The plan? What plan? You think this abomination is part of some grand scheme?" You think manipulating time is a solution to anything? Ellis didn't answer. Instead, he stepped aside, letting the man in the suit take center stage. I was already shaking with frustration, but now I could feel the fear creeping in. What were they about to say? What had they been hiding from me all this time? The man in the suit finally spoke, his voice calm but chilling. You've uncovered quite a lot, Dr. Stoy. Impressive. But you still don't understand the scope of what you're dealing with. You think you can stop Kronos, reverse what's been done? But the truth is, you're already too late. The words hit me like a slap. Too late? What the hell are you talking about? The future has already been altered. The man continued, stepping closer to the machine. His gaze was unwavering. You've seen the fractures. You've felt the tremors in time. It's all happening. Whether you stop the machine or not, it's already begun. I was shaking now, not with fear but with the overwhelming sense of betrayal. I had been right all along. They had known what was happening. They had known what would happen. The machine wasn't some rogue experiment gone wrong. It was part of a larger agenda, a plan to rewrite history, to control it. But why? Why go to such lengths? And who stood to gain from such an impossible manipulation? The man in the suit stepped closer to the console, his fingers brushing against the control panel. He didn't seem afraid of the machine, didn't seem worried about the consequences of what he was about to do. It's too late to turn back, Dr. Stoy, he said softly. But you can still be part of it. You can help us complete the project. Help us remake time. Fix what's broken. I stared at him in disbelief. Remake time? You want to control time. You want to play God. The man didn't deny it. Control is the only way forward. The world as you know it has failed. Kronos is our solution. And you're the missing piece. You were always meant to be part of this. I felt a rush of anger flood through me. I had trusted these people. I had trusted Ellis. They had used me. All along, they had used me. I won't be part of this, I said, my voice firm. You can't just rewrite history. You can't control time. Time is a force. It breaks when you try to manipulate it. And I won't help you destroy everything. The man in the suit smiled. It was a smile of quiet satisfaction, like he had already won. You're already too far gone, Dr. Stoy, he said. You can't stop what's coming. But you can be part of the new world we're creating. Ellis looked at me one last time, his eyes filled with regret. I'm sorry, Alex. I tried to warn you. I stood my ground, knowing the fight wasn't over. Not yet. I didn't know how, but I knew I couldn't let them win. I couldn't let them rewrite the world. But how? How could I stop them? I looked back at Kronos, the machine that had already fractured time. And for the first time, I realized what I had to do. It wasn't about stopping the machine. It was about stopping them. If I could destroy the machine, destroy their plan, then maybe, just maybe, I could stop the future from breaking completely. I stood there, the weight of the world pressing down on my chest. The machine hummed softly behind me, the sound like the ticking of a clock that had already run out of time. Ellis, the man in the suit, and the two others stood nearby, their cold eyes on me, waiting for me to make my move. You think you can stop this? The man in the suit asked, his voice smooth, almost patronizing. It's already too late, Dr. Stoy. Kronos has already begun the process. Nothing will ever be the same. I didn't respond immediately. My thoughts raced, a whirlwind of confusion, anger, and despair. The truth was ugly, raw. They wanted to control time, rewrite history, and I had been nothing more than a pawn in their game. The idea of destroying the machine, of undoing everything that had been set in motion, felt impossible. I had been warned from the very beginning that time, once manipulated, couldn't be fixed. But deep down, I knew what I had to do. If I didn't act now, everything would fall apart. There would be no stopping the damage, no returning to a time before the machine had been activated. The consequences of what had already happened would unfold with or without me. The future, as I knew it, was shattered. I took a step forward, my eyes locked on the machine. I knew what I had to do, destroy it. But with every step, I felt the gravity of my choice. Destroying Kronos wasn't just about stopping the catastrophe. It was about erasing everything that had been done, all the suffering, the manipulation. It was a gamble, one that could either set things right or plunge the world into irreversible chaos. But if I didn't destroy the machine, if I didn't stop them, they would continue their plan, and everything I had uncovered would be for nothing. I reached for the console, my hands trembling. The buttons, the levers, all the controls that had been used to manipulate time, to fracture the world as we knew it, they were within my reach. I hesitated for a moment, glancing back at Ellis, who stood there silently, his expression unreadable. He knew what I was about to do. "I'm sorry," I whispered to him. For everything. For what he had become. For what I had failed to see. But in the end, it didn't matter. This was the only way forward. Before anyone could stop me, I slammed my hand down on the activation button, the one that would shut the machine down, for good. There was a deafening silence. Then, the lights flickered, and the hum of the machine deepened, vibrating through the floor beneath me. The walls seemed to shake, as if protesting the interruption. For a brief moment, I thought I had made the wrong choice, that I had sealed our fate by destroying the very thing that could have fixed the future. But then, just as quickly, the noise stopped. The machine powered down. A heavy silence filled the room. I looked around, my heart racing. The men in the suits didn't move. Ellis still stood in the corner, his eyes locked on me, the weight of his own regret hanging in the air between us. The machine was silent, its lights dimmed, its power gone. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. And then I heard it. The voice. "You think it's over, don't you?" I spun around, my pulse pounding in my ears. The voice came from nowhere, but it was unmistakable. It was my own voice. The voice I had been hearing in the transmissions. The voice from the future. I stared at the men in the suits, confused, desperate. What is this? What did I just do?" The man in the suit stepped forward, a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "It's over for you, Dr. Stoy. But not for us." Before I could react, everything around me began to blur. The air thickened, the walls stretched, and the room seemed to dissolve into nothingness. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. It was like time itself was being pulled apart, torn from its foundation. And then, just as quickly as it had started, everything stopped. The world snapped back into focus, and I was standing alone. The men were gone. The machine was gone. It was like nothing had happened at all. I staggered back, my legs unsteady. The room was empty. The air was still. And then I realized, the future I had been hearing from, the one that had warned me, had already happened. The disaster had already unfolded, and I was just a part of a cycle, a loop of events that had already occurred. I had failed. I had already failed. But then, just as the weight of that realization began to sink in, I heard the voice again, faint but clear. "It's not over yet." My heart skipped a beat. It's not over yet. Could it be? Could I still change the outcome? Was there a chance, after all, to undo the damage, to break the cycle? But as the voice faded into silence, I knew one thing for sure. Time had already fractured, and no matter how hard I tried, I would always be chasing it, trying to repair what had been broken. The question now was whether it could be repaired at all, or if this was just the beginning of something far worse. And in the end, I realized that the only thing I could do was keep moving forward, because time waits for no one. I had always been a skeptic, a man of logic. I was a computer scientist, after all. I spent my days writing code, building algorithms, and solving problems that most people would never dream of. The world of theoretical physics and ancient mysteries was as far from my mind as the moon. But that was before I stumbled upon it, the thing that would change everything. It started with a routine project. A simple set of data logs I was analyzing at the AI lab I worked for. At first glance, everything seemed normal. But there was something in the data that didn't add up. Patterns too perfect to be random. A string of numbers interspersed with what appeared to be coordinates? No, that couldn't be right. My mind was racing as I reviewed the data. I checked and double-checked, and the strings kept coming back the same. It was like some invisible hand was guiding the flow of the numbers. I paused, staring at the screen. The data wasn't just information, it was trying to tell me something. I leaned in closer, my fingers hovering over the keyboard, uncertain of what I should do next. Just as I was about to close the file and dismiss it as a mistake, an email pinged in my inbox. The subject line read, "You're closer than you think." I froze. My first thought was that it was some kind of prank. But when I opened it, I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. The message was short and cryptic. "The network you've found is older than any of us. It's been there for centuries. But now you are part of it. Stay away from the keepers. You've been warned." I closed my laptop abruptly, my heart pounding in my chest. This was insane. I had just stumbled upon a strange set of data, and now I was receiving warnings from an anonymous source? This couldn't be happening. The next few days passed in a blur. The email nagged at me, but I tried to push it out of my mind. Yet, the more I thought about it, the more the pieces seemed to fit. I went back to the data logs, analyzing them further. As I dug deeper, I started to see something even stranger, a network of connections, not between computers, but between human minds. It was as if this data was encoding thoughts, events, and even emotions. I wasn't just analyzing raw data anymore. I was peering into the lives of people who had lived long before me. That's when it hit me. I wasn't looking at any ordinary database or AI. This wasn't even technology in the way we understand it. What I had found was a network that transcended time itself, connecting people across the ages, pulling at the very fabric of human consciousness. I had to know more. I began researching, my obsession growing. I started with the basics, neural networks, ancient technologies, anything that could explain what I was seeing. But there was nothing in modern science that could explain the patterns in the data. Nothing that could explain the feeling that was growing inside me, that I was being watched. That night, a package arrived at my door. No return address. Inside was an old leather-bound journal, yellowed with age. The handwriting was barely legible, but as I flipped through its pages, the familiar data patterns I had seen earlier appeared again. Someone had recorded their own experiences with the network, their interactions with it. I held my breath, flipping the pages faster, desperate to understand. And then, as I reached the final page, a name appeared, the Keepers of Time. It was a warning, just like the email had said. I knew I had to keep going. But I also knew that by doing so, I was stepping into something much larger than myself, something that could change the course of history. I wasn't just uncovering a hidden network. I was uncovering the means by which the world had been manipulated for centuries. And someone, or something, was determined to stop me from learning the truth. The journal had left me with more questions than answers. The more I read, the less I understood. The author, a scientist from a bygone era, had written about the network in a detached, almost clinical way, but the references were unmistakable. There were no real explanations, just snippets of fragmented experiences, visions of events from centuries ago, whispers of long-forgotten civilizations, and most disturbingly, mentions of the Keepers. I spent the next few weeks buried in research, attempting to decode the journal's cryptic passages. The name, the Keepers, kept appearing, but no amount of online searches or academic databases yielded any results. It was as if the group had never existed in the history books at all. I grew more frustrated by the day. That's when I found my first solid lead. One evening, as I reviewed a particular passage, my computer screen flickered. A strange symbol, an ancient-looking geometric design, appeared in the corner of my screen. It vanished before I could fully comprehend it, but I knew what I had seen. The symbol matched one that had appeared in the journal. I immediately began tracing the source of the anomaly. It led me to a secretive website, hidden deep within the dark web. My heart raced as I navigated through the encrypted pages, my eyes scanning every word. On the site was a single message. The network can be unlocked, but not without sacrifice. My pulse quickened. This was the breakthrough I had been waiting for, but something about the message felt wrong. The website was guarded by layers of cryptography and firewalls, but somehow I had gained access, just as I had uncovered the ancient symbol. It was as though the network was drawing me in, almost as if it had been waiting for me to find it. The deeper I explored, the more I began to understand the true implications of the network. The journal had referred to it as a conduit for influencing human consciousness over vast stretches of time. But this wasn't just theoretical. The keepers had used it to subtly alter history, changing the course of wars, influencing political leaders, and dictating the rise and fall of civilizations. But there was a catch. Each manipulation required the participation of individuals, people who, knowingly or unknowingly, contributed to the unfolding of events. I began to realize that every major event in history could have been orchestrated through the network, and I had just stumbled upon the mechanism. As I processed this revelation, my phone rang. The caller ID was blocked. "Dr. Holloway, I see you found it," a voice said, smooth and cold. "The question is, what will you do with it?" I felt a chill run down my spine. My fingers trembled as I held the phone, but I didn't speak. The voice continued, "The network is not something you can control. You don't even know what you're dealing with. Walk away, or you will be used in ways you cannot imagine." The line went dead. I stared at the phone in disbelief, my mind racing. The warning was clear. Someone, or something, was watching me, and they didn't want me to uncover the truth. But I couldn't stop now. I had uncovered the first real clue, and I had no choice but to continue. If the keepers wanted to stop me, they had already lost. I was no longer in control of my investigation. It was as if the network itself was pulling me deeper into its web, and there was no way out. The phone call was a clear warning, but I couldn't let it deter me. I had already ventured too far into the rabbit hole. The more I researched, the more I realized how little I truly understood about the forces I was up against. The network was not just a passive system of information, it was alive, evolving, and manipulating events across time. It had been controlled by the keepers of time for centuries, and now I had somehow unwittingly become a part of their game. Days passed, and I grew increasingly paranoid. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every time I turned around, I felt like someone was standing just behind me, invisible, waiting for me to make the wrong move. I stopped leaving my apartment unless absolutely necessary, always keeping a low profile. But the more I hid, the more I realized how hopeless it was to escape. The keepers were everywhere, their influence stretching into every corner of society. One night, while reviewing more journal entries, I came across a reference to an old underground facility located beneath a major city, one that, according to the notes, was the original site where the network had first been activated centuries ago. The journal mentioned a power core, buried deep underground, the source of the network's energy. It was a shot in the dark, but I had to investigate. The risk of uncovering the truth seemed worth it. If I could find the facility, I might be able to learn more about the network and, perhaps, find a way to stop it. I booked a flight the next morning, heading to the city mentioned in the journal. The entire time, I felt an unsettling sense of being followed. I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that the keepers were aware of my every move. They weren't just passive watchers, they were actively controlling the strings, and I was nothing more than a pawn. When I arrived, I rented a car and headed to the address, an old industrial complex in the outskirts of town. The area was deserted, the streets dimly lit by flickering streetlights. The building, though crumbling with age, looked out of place. It seemed too pristine, too intentional amidst the surrounding decay. It was exactly how I imagined it, hidden in plain sight. I found the entrance underground, tucked away behind a rusted door in a forgotten alley. With a mix of fear and determination, I pushed the door open and descended into the dark, cold tunnel beneath the city. What I found was beyond anything I had ever imagined. The underground facility was vast, its walls lined with ancient technology, some of which seemed to predate anything I had ever seen. Monolithic machines hummed with a quiet, eerie power, their functions entirely alien to me. At the center of the room was the power core, glowing with an unearthly blue light. The energy emanating from it was palpable, an almost magnetic force pulling me toward it. But as I approached, I noticed something else. Shadowy figures, indistinct but clearly humanoid, moved through the shadows, watching me from afar. They were like ghosts, silent, always just out of my line of sight. I was being observed. Suddenly, a voice boomed from the darkness, sharp and commanding. "You've come too far, Dr. Holloway," the voice said, chilling me to my core. "The keepers will not allow you to destroy what has been set in motion. You are part of it now, whether you like it or not." I spun around, but there was no one there. The room seemed to close in on me as I realized this wasn't just a lab. It was a trap. A way to pull me deeper into the network's influence. My heart raced. The keepers were not just watching, they had orchestrated this. Every step I had taken had been anticipated, manipulated. I had been guided into this moment, unknowingly fulfilling a role I had never chosen. And just as the realization hit me, the room flickered, and for a split second, the power core blazed with an intense light. It was like a vision flashed before my eyes, a memory that was not mine, but someone else's. A memory from the past. It was then I understood. The network had always been manipulating me, guiding my every move. I wasn't just a scientist. I had been a part of the network for far longer than I had realized. I had to leave. But the keepers were closing in. I was no longer just an observer of history. I was now a player in it. A pawn in their game. I barely made it out of the underground facility. The moments after I left were a blur, my heart racing, my mind struggling to process everything I had just discovered. The keepers had control over the network, and by extension, control over me. I had seen something, felt something deep within the facility that connected me to the past, but what exactly was it? How had they tied me to this ancient network without my knowledge? I needed answers. I had to know what had been done to me and, more importantly, how to stop it. But the closer I came to the truth, the more dangerous it became. Back in my apartment, I sat for hours, poring over every scrap of information I had gathered. The journal was my lifeline, the one thing that tied everything together. But there were still so many unanswered questions. Who exactly were the keepers? How did they control the network? And what was my role in all of this? I began digging into the origins of the facility, trying to trace its connections to the modern-day network. My research led me to a few dead ends, but one name kept popping up: Dr. Isabel Monroe, a researcher who had vanished without a trace decades ago. According to a few obscure records, she had been part of a classified project related to neural networks and consciousness mapping. She had been studying the potential for human minds to communicate across time, much like the network I had uncovered. I found an old address linked to her, an office building in the city that had long been abandoned. It was worth checking out, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking directly into a trap. Still, I had no choice. My mind was set on uncovering the full scope of the conspiracy, no matter the cost. The building was eerily quiet when I arrived. It seemed forgotten by time itself, much like the people who had worked there. The entryway was dark, its windows boarded up. But inside, the air was thick with dust and disuse, as if the place hadn't seen any human activity in years. As I made my way deeper into the building, I came across a locked door that had clearly been tampered with. My fingers trembled as I pried it open, revealing a hidden office space, untouched by the passage of time. Papers were scattered across the desk, files filled with strange diagrams and sketches of neural interfaces. The name, The Keepers, appeared again and again, along with disturbing references to the manipulation of human history. Then, buried beneath the clutter, I found something I hadn't expected, a personal journal, much like the one I had first found. This one, however, was different. The handwriting was neat, controlled, and contained disturbing entries about altering human memories and experiences. It was Dr. Monroe's work, but there was something darker about it. She had not just been researching the network, she had been its architect, or at least the key part of its creation. The journal described a breakthrough, a method of implanting memories, of controlling not just individual actions, but entire timelines. It detailed experiments in which people had their consciousness merged with the network, unknowingly influencing the course of events in history. The Keepers had been doing this for centuries, subtly steering the world in a direction that served their interests. I was horrified. This wasn't just some underground network. It was a tool of manipulation, a machine that had been shaping human destiny for centuries. The network had not just existed as an ancient relic, it had been a means of control, and I had unknowingly been a part of it since childhood. I felt a pang of guilt. Had I been influenced too? Were my thoughts and decisions my own, or had they been guided by the network all along? I had to face it. I wasn't just a passive observer anymore. I had been shaped by the same forces I was now trying to understand. But the deeper I dug, the more I realized I couldn't stop now. I had come too far. I had to confront the Keepers, learn how to fight the network, and expose the truth. But I also knew the stakes had grown higher. I was no longer just at risk of being silenced. I had become part of a much larger, more dangerous game. As I sat in the dim light of my apartment, the weight of the journal's contents pressing down on me, the pieces began to fall into place. Dr. Monroe had unlocked a terrifying truth. The network wasn't just a means to influence history. It was a vast system designed to control human consciousness across time. I wasn't just connected to it by accident. I had been part of its design from the beginning. The deeper I dug into Dr. Monroe's journal, the more I began to understand. The method she had devised for implanting memories and guiding human actions through the network wasn't theoretical. It was real, and it was still operational. The Keepers had perfected it. They had woven themselves into the fabric of time itself, pulling strings, shifting events, and altering the outcomes of battles, revolutions, and even personal lives. One particular entry stood out to me. It was written in a hurried, frantic tone, as if Dr. Monroe had realized something in the midst of her experiments, something she had never intended to reveal. It read, "The network is not merely a tool for history, it is history. Every moment, every choice, every path taken is the result of its influence. We think we are making free decisions, but in reality, we are guided by the currents of time, manipulated by a force older than any of us. The Keepers understand this. They control the flow. But what happens if the flow is disrupted? What if someone dares to sever the connection?" I sat back, the words echoing in my mind. What if someone dared to sever the connection? It wasn't just about uncovering the truth anymore. It was about breaking free. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. The reason I felt so trapped, so controlled, was because I had never truly been free. The Keepers had been subtly shaping my actions and decisions for years. They had used the network to guide me, perhaps even manipulate my discoveries, pushing me to dig deeper into the very mystery they wanted to keep hidden. As I looked over the journal, a growing sense of unease began to take root. There was more, much more. Dr. Monroe had left behind a blueprint, a set of instructions for shutting down the network, for breaking the connection once and for all. But it was locked behind a series of complex algorithms and safeguards designed by the keepers. The deeper I looked, the more I realized just how far-reaching their control was. They had planned for every eventuality. In the final pages of the journal, Dr. Monroe wrote, "The truth is out there, but you will not be the first to find it. The keepers will protect their secret at any cost. There are no alliances, no safe spaces. You will be hunted. But if you succeed, the world will never be the same. The network is the key to controlling time itself. Break it, and the world as we know it will unravel." I felt the ground shift beneath me. This wasn't just about exposing a conspiracy. It was about destroying the foundation of everything we knew. The keepers had engineered history itself, and if I succeeded in breaking the network, everything would change. Society, politics, the very fabric of reality could collapse into chaos. But I couldn't back down now. I had seen too much, understood too much. I had to finish what I had started. That's when the first true revelation came, the key to unlocking the network's full power. It wasn't buried in a distant facility or encrypted in codes. It was in me. My connection to the network had always been personal, hidden deep within my mind. Every action I had taken, every decision, had been subtly influenced by the network. And now, I was its greatest threat. The realization hit me like a bolt of lightning. I had been a part of the network since childhood, a piece in the puzzle of history that the keepers had carefully manipulated. I wasn't just trying to uncover their secrets. I was the missing link. They had always known I would find out. The battle had just begun. The revelation that I was connected to the network was both liberating and terrifying. It meant that I had the potential to unravel everything, but it also made me the most dangerous person to the keepers. They had spent centuries building this system, shaping human history to their liking, and now they couldn't afford for anyone to tear it down. I was a liability, a loose thread that needed to be silenced before I could uncover the full extent of their control. The danger was real, but I couldn't stop. The more I learned, the clearer it became. The keepers were not just a secret society. They were a global network of individuals who had intertwined themselves with the fabric of time. They had learned to manipulate events through the network, bending the course of history to their will. But there was a price. I began to search for any weakness in the system, any flaw that could give me the advantage. The deeper I dug, the more I realized that the keepers had foreseen this moment. They had prepared for anyone who might come too close to uncovering their secret. Every clue I found, every lead I followed, seemed to be a part of a larger trap. They were guiding me, pushing me toward an inevitable confrontation. I couldn't trust anyone. Not even the people I thought were on my side. One night, while meeting with an old colleague, a former member of the keepers who had defected, I learned something chilling. He had been part of the early days of the network's creation and had witnessed firsthand how the keepers altered key moments in history. But there was more. The network, he said, was evolving, becoming something beyond their control. The keepers' influence was slipping, and they were desperate to maintain their hold over it. The network wasn't just a tool, he explained, his voice trembling. It's alive. It's a living, breathing entity that feeds on the energy of human consciousness. Over the years, it's grown stronger, more self-aware. The keepers have been feeding it, guiding it, but they can't control it anymore. And now, it's turning on them. The implications of what he said hit me like a wave. If the network had grown beyond the keeper's control, then it wasn't just a tool for manipulating the past. It was an independent force, capable of influencing the present and the future. It had become a godlike entity, and no one could predict what would happen if it became fully autonomous. I knew I had to act quickly. If the keepers had lost control, then maybe, just maybe, I could use that to my advantage. But first, I needed to find a way to sever my connection to the network. If I could disconnect myself, I would be free from its influence, and could take the next steps in exposing the truth. But the deeper I went, the more I realized how difficult it would be. The connection wasn't just a mental link, it was embedded in my neural pathways, in the very fabric of my being. It wasn't something that could be easily undone. I sought out more information, poring over every document, every piece of data I could find. I discovered that the key to severing the connection lay within the original power core, the one buried deep beneath the facility I had visited. The core was not just the source of the network's power, it was the heart of it. To sever my connection, I would have to destroy it. But that would mean destroying the network itself. It was a choice I hadn't anticipated: destroy the system and risk chaos, or try to control it and become a part of the very system I was fighting against. As I weighed my options, a new figure emerged from the shadows. Someone who had been watching me all along. "You can't do it, Aaron," a voice said, cold and familiar. "You think you have the power to destroy the network, but you're just another cog in the machine." I turned, but no one was there. The voice, however, lingered, echoing in my mind. The keepers were more than just human, they were everywhere. The network had become their ultimate weapon, and they were prepared to do whatever it took to stop me. The stakes had never been higher. My next move would decide the fate of the world, or what was left of it. The weight of my decisions began to settle in. I had uncovered so much, yet every step I took led me deeper into the labyrinth of manipulation. The truth was almost within my grasp, but I was beginning to question who or what I could trust. The more I learned, the more I realized how deeply embedded the keepers were in every part of society, how they had infiltrated governments, corporations, and even the underground networks I had thought I was tapping into. They had eyes everywhere, and I was just one small pawn in their game. Despite this, I couldn't turn back. The journal had given me the key, and I knew what I had to do. Destroy the power core. Sever the connection. It was the only way to free myself, and the world, from the grip of the network. But I wasn't alone in this mission. I had allies, or so I thought. Claire, a former associate and a brilliant hacker, had become an invaluable part of my investigation. We had worked together for months, tracing encrypted messages, breaking codes, and gathering intel. She had even risked her safety to help me uncover hidden parts of the network. I trusted her implicitly, or at least I thought I did. We had made plans to infiltrate the underground facility once again. This time, we would destroy the power core and finally shut down the network. We prepared every detail: timing, escape routes, and even how to avoid the surveillance system set up by the keepers. Everything was ready. But when the time came to execute our plan, everything went horribly wrong. We had just made our way into the facility's main control room when I felt a strange tension in the air. Claire had been leading the way, guiding me through the dark corridors, her steps quick and sure. But as we neared the control center, I noticed something was off. There was a strange urgency in her movements, a sense of impatience. "Claire, what's going on?" I asked, my voice low. She turned to me, her eyes shadowed with something I couldn't place. "We need to hurry. There's no time." Before I could ask what she meant, I felt a sharp pain in my chest, an electric shock that coursed through my body, stunning me into paralysis. I collapsed to the ground, gasping for air, my heart racing. The world around me blurred as I struggled to keep my vision focused. "Claire," I managed to croak. Her figure loomed over me, her expression unreadable. And then, the truth hit me like a freight train. "I'm sorry, Aaron," she said, her voice cold. "I didn't have a choice." It was a betrayal I hadn't seen coming. Claire wasn't an ally, she was a mole, planted by the keepers. She had been feeding them information about my every move, guiding me toward my own downfall. Why? I gasped, my breath shallow as I tried to push myself up. Why help them? I didn't want to, she replied, her voice breaking for just a moment. But they have control over everything. If I hadn't done this, they would have killed me. And you. I couldn't let that happen. The world around me started to spin as the poison from the shock took effect, my limbs growing heavier with each passing second. I realized then that everything I had done, every decision I thought I had made for myself, had been manipulated. Claire had been part of the Keeper's plan from the beginning, an instrument of their control. But just before the darkness claimed me, I saw something in her eyes, a flicker of regret, of hesitation. I'm sorry, she whispered again, almost as if she, too, had been trapped in this web of manipulation. The last thing I saw before I blacked out was Claire's face, her expression a mixture of sorrow and guilt, as if she were trying to hold on to the person I used to be. I awoke hours later, my body stiff and aching from the shock. The room was dim, the air heavy with the scent of machinery and old metal. I tried to sit up, but the weight of my head made everything feel unsteady. My mind swirled with confusion, Claire's betrayal still fresh in my thoughts. Had she truly been working with the Keepers all along? Or had she been forced into it, just like I had been manipulated by the network? I couldn't be sure. My first instinct was to get out of there, to escape before the Keepers could make their move. But the truth was, I was already too far gone. There was no running now. I was a part of this story, whether I liked it or not. I looked around, trying to assess my situation. I was in a small, reinforced room beneath the underground facility. The walls were lined with high-tech monitors and control panels, and the floor hummed with the low thrum of machinery. At first glance, it looked like a command center of sorts, perfectly designed to oversee the operation of the network. But I knew now, it was far more than that. I shakily rose to my feet, my mind racing with thoughts of how to stop the Keepers, of how to destroy the network and sever the connection once and for all. I had to get to the power core. That was the key. But Claire's betrayal had made things complicated. Now, I didn't just have the Keepers to worry about. I had to face the full weight of the network's influence. I pulled myself toward the control center's main terminal, determined to gather information. My hands trembled as I accessed the system, but somehow, the commands felt familiar. It was as if I had used this system before, in another life, another timeline. A chill ran down my spine as I realized that the network had not just been controlling events around me, it had been manipulating my very consciousness. Everything I had done up until now had been part of a larger plan. I wasn't just uncovering a conspiracy, I was living it. As I navigated the system, I found a series of encrypted files labeled with dates and events from history, wars, political upheavals, social movements, all with one thing in common: they had been altered, influenced, or even created by the network. I began to understand the true purpose of the Keepers. They were more than just manipulators of history. They were the architects of time itself, pulling the strings behind the scenes to create the world they wanted. But there was something more, something I hadn't seen before. A set of coordinates popped up on the screen. The location was familiar. It was the same facility I had visited earlier, but this time, it pointed to a different section of the complex, one I hadn't yet explored. The coordinates were clear: the heart of the network, the core of its power, was within my reach. But it wasn't just the network's power I had to confront. There was a deeper, darker truth hidden within that core, a truth I wasn't ready for. With no time to lose, I accessed the hidden vaults in the system and found the final piece of the puzzle: Dr. Monroe's last report, detailing the origins of the network. It wasn't a mere technological experiment. It was a method of controlling the very essence of humanity. The network didn't just link minds across time, it shaped them. The Keepers had used it to rewrite history, manipulating the thoughts and actions of individuals for centuries. But the most disturbing revelation was that the network had not been static. It had evolved, grown beyond the control of the keepers. And now, it was acting of its own accord. The network had become self-aware. It had its own agenda. The final files showed that the network's creators, Dr. Monroe included, had realized the danger too late. They had tried to shut it down, but every attempt had failed. The network had adapted, evolving with each new interference. And now, the only way to stop it was to sever its connection to the world entirely. The truth was clear: if I didn't act fast, the network would begin to reshape the world in its own image, and humanity's fate would be sealed. With newfound resolve, I knew what I had to do. I couldn't afford to hesitate any longer. The keepers had underestimated me. They thought I was just another pawn in their game. But now, I was playing by my own rules. The core was within reach. The time had come. The air felt thick with tension as I made my way through the labyrinth of the facility. Every step I took seemed to echo louder than the last, as if the very walls were aware of my approach. I knew that this was it, the point of no return. The core of the network was just ahead, and everything I had worked for, everything I had discovered, was about to come to a head. Claire's betrayal weighed heavily on my mind, but I had no time to dwell on it. The keepers, the network, all of it was bigger than any one person. My mission now was simple: destroy the core and sever the connection that had tied humanity to this web of control for centuries. The stakes had never been higher. If I failed, the consequences would be catastrophic. The network would reshape the world in ways we couldn't begin to understand. As I reached the final chamber, I found myself face to face with the power core. It was enormous, an intricate system of wires, glowing lights, and humming machinery. But it wasn't just a machine. It was alive, pulsating with energy, like a beating heart at the center of a vast, unseen network. I could feel its influence, pressing against my mind, tugging at my consciousness. The connection was undeniable, and for a moment, I hesitated. I had been part of this system for so long. My every action, my every decision, had been shaped by it. The network had guided me, controlled me, and now I was supposed to destroy it. But was I strong enough to do it? Could I really sever the ties that bound me to it? I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. This was bigger than me. It was bigger than anything I had ever imagined. I wasn't just fighting for my own freedom, I was fighting for the future of humanity. If the network remained intact, if the keepers retained control, nothing would ever be the same. The world would become a puppet to forces we couldn't even see. But as I reached for the control panel to initiate the shutdown sequence, I heard a voice, a familiar voice, suddenly cut through the silence. Aaron. I turned quickly, my heart pounding. Standing in the doorway was Claire. Her expression was cold, emotionless, but there was something in her eyes, a flicker of something deeper. Regret? Fear? Claire, what are you doing here? I demanded, my voice hoarse. You're working with them, aren't you? Why are you trying to stop me? She stepped forward slowly, her eyes never leaving mine. I'm not here to stop you, she said quietly. I'm here to stop them. I stared at her, disbelief and confusion swirling in my mind. What do you mean? The keepers? You betrayed me, Claire. You led me into their trap. I did, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. But I didn't have a choice. You have to understand, the keepers. They've been manipulating me too, just like they've been manipulating you. But I found out the truth. They need the network to survive. They feed off it. Without it, they lose their power, their influence over the world. If you destroy it, you're not just destroying the network. You're killing them, too. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Everything I had thought was true was suddenly in question. I wasn't just fighting for the freedom of humanity. I was also fighting against the very people who had been shaped by the network, just like me. The keepers had twisted their minds, just as they had twisted mine. They were no longer just individuals. They were extensions of the system, its guardians, and its enforcers. I don't care about them, I said, my voice shaking with anger. I care about stopping this. I care about destroying the network so no one else has to live under its control. Claire nodded slowly, her face softening with understanding. I know. But if you destroy the core, if you sever the network's link to the world, you'll cause a massive disruption. The world won't just be free, it will fall apart. It will be chaos. I felt my resolve falter. Could I really do this? Could I risk everything just to free humanity from the grip of the keepers? Was there another way? But as I looked into Claire's eyes, I realized that I had no choice. The network had already manipulated so much of my life, so much of everyone's life. It had shaped history, changed the course of wars, economies, and entire civilizations. It was a force that had no place in the world. I turned back to the power core, my decision made. The shutdown sequence had already begun, and I knew that once I initiated it, there would be no turning back. The consequences would be catastrophic, but it was the only way to break free. I reached for the final switch, my fingers trembling. As I pulled it down, the entire facility seemed to shudder. The lights flickered, the hum of the machinery grew louder, and for a moment, I thought I saw the network itself fighting back, resisting, struggling to maintain control. But it was too late. The core powered down, the lights dimming as the system went silent. The network was severed. For a moment, there was nothing but stillness. The room was silent. The hum of the power core, the pulsing energy that had fueled the network for centuries, slowly faded into nothingness. For a moment, I stood there, frozen, unable to comprehend what had just happened. Had I really done it? Had I severed the connection? The network, the silent puppet master of history, was no more. But as the darkness settled, a strange emptiness filled the space around me. It wasn't just the room, it was the entire world. I could feel it, a strange void creeping into my mind. The world wasn't just free of the network, it was unanchored, as if it had lost its foundation. Claire stood beside me, her expression unreadable. She didn't speak at first, and neither did I. The weight of what we had just done hung heavy between us. The keepers were gone, but so was the invisible thread that had bound humanity to the network. What had we unleashed? What would happen now? I don't know what's coming, Claire said quietly, her voice barely audible. But we've given the world a chance. A chance to rebuild, to break free. I looked at her, my heart conflicted. She had betrayed me, led me into this mess, but in the end, she had helped me. She had opened my eyes to the true nature of the network. And now, she was standing by me as we faced the aftermath of our actions. I wish we had more answers, I said, my voice shaking with the uncertainty of the future. But we've done what we had to do. We've freed ourselves from the past, from the network's control. The room around us began to tremble as the last remnants of the network's power faded away. I felt the world shift, as if it were trying to find its bearings, to reorient itself. The past had been rewritten, and the future was now open, unwritten, unpredictable, and free. But as the tremors subsided, I couldn't shake the feeling that we had just opened a door to something new, and that what lay on the other side was both terrifying and full of possibilities. Do you think it's over? Claire asked, her voice tinged with uncertainty. I don't know, I replied. But we've given the world a chance to decide for itself. Now it's up to humanity to make its own choices. I turned to face her, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel the presence of the network in my mind. It was gone. But that emptiness, something was missing. The world I had known for so long, a world shaped by the network's influence, was no longer the same. It had to rebuild, piece by piece, and the people who had been manipulated by the network had to learn how to live without it. "We have a long road ahead," I said, my voice firm now. "But we've taken the first step." Claire nodded slowly. "And maybe, just maybe, we can finally make our own history." I stood there, looking out at the dim, flickering lights of the facility, as the reality of what we had done began to settle in. The network was gone. The keepers were no more. But the future was now a blank slate. No longer bound by the invisible threads of control, humanity could begin again. But as I turned away, I couldn't shake the thought that lingered in the back of my mind. The network had been severed, yes, but had it truly been destroyed? Or was something else, something darker, waiting to take its place? As I walked away, the echoes of the past still reverberated in my mind. The battle was over, but the war for the future had only just begun. The rain had just started to fall as I stepped into the dimly lit alleyway, a place I'd passed by countless times without a second thought. But tonight it felt different. The air was thick with the scent of wet asphalt, and the distant hum of city traffic seemed muffled as if the world outside had faded away. A small, crumpled envelope was pressed into my hand by a stranger, someone I'd never seen before. His face, partially obscured by a hood, looked like it had been worn down by years of secrets. He didn't speak a word, just pressed the envelope into my palm with a firm grip before disappearing into the shadows. It felt wrong, instinctively. But that's the thing about instincts, they're often too late. Curiosity tugged at me, pulling me toward the envelope. The edges were torn, the paper thin, but there was something about the weight of it that made me pause. I knew, without looking, that this wasn't just a random tip. Someone wanted me to see something important. The brief flicker of doubt that crossed my mind was quickly drowned out by my reporter's instinct. The same one that had led me to uncover corruption, hidden deals, and buried truths over the years. I tore the envelope open in the quiet of my apartment, the yellow light of my desk lamp casting long shadows against the walls. Inside was a single sheet of paper, covered in cryptic symbols and what appeared to be financial figures. At first, it didn't make sense. But as I studied the strange sequence of numbers and letters, I felt an unease settle in the pit of my stomach. This wasn't a random cipher. It was a ledger of transactions, but not the kind I was used to seeing. These figures were too clean, too precise. This was something bigger. I ran my fingers over the paper, tracing the lines of numbers that seemed to pulse with meaning. There were no names, no obvious connections. But then I saw it, one word that stood out from the rest, written in faint ink. The shadow economy. The phrase echoed in my mind like a warning. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the tip of the iceberg. This wasn't about money or power, it was about something far darker. Something far more dangerous. As a journalist, I've chased stories before, but nothing like this. I've uncovered scandals, caught thieves red-handed, and exposed the rotten core of the system. But this was different. I wasn't just reporting on the surface of a story. This felt like a hidden world, a world that had been operating in the shadows for far longer than I could comprehend. But who was behind it? Why was I being pulled into it? The answers were hidden somewhere in these symbols, in this ledger. And I had no choice but to follow the trail, wherever it would lead. But as I began to gather my thoughts, a feeling of dread crept over me. Someone, was watching. I couldn't see them, but I could feel their presence. The fear was subtle, but it was there, lingering just beneath the surface. Was this just the paranoia of being a reporter, or was there something more to this? I couldn't stop now. I wouldn't. The story had already begun. And as the rain continued to fall outside, I realized that this story might be far bigger than I could ever imagine. I spent the next few days obsessing over the cryptic ledger. The more I stared at the symbols and numbers, the less they seemed like random digits. It was as though the paper itself was alive, holding secrets that were just out of reach. My mind raced through possible explanations. Was this just some elaborate hoax? Or had I stumbled upon something much larger, a conspiracy buried deep in the foundations of the world's financial systems? The first breakthrough came on the third day. I was sitting at my desk, the papers spread out before me, when a subtle pattern caught my eye. The numbers, once a chaotic mess, started to fall into place. They weren't just financial transactions. They were coordinates, locations, places connected by threads of financial power stretching across the globe. It wasn't the type of business I was familiar with. These weren't normal accounts or tax records. These were shadowy transactions, moving vast sums of money from one shell corporation to another, using layers of offshore accounts. I leaned forward, my fingers tapping the surface of the desk. My heart skipped a beat when I saw the word Gibraltar next to one of the coordinates. That was no ordinary location. It was known for being a haven for offshore accounts, a place where people could hide wealth without scrutiny. But what about the other locations? I quickly jotted down the names: Zurich, Cayman Islands, Singapore. It was a map, but it wasn't a map of the world I knew. It was a map of hidden wealth, of a system that operated entirely in the shadows. There was more. The coordinates weren't just financial hubs. They were connected to events that, on the surface, seemed unrelated. A merger here, a crisis there, a political scandal tucked into a corner of the ledger. I could almost feel the connections tightening around me, a web of influence that I had no idea existed, and yet it had always been there, right under the surface. But the most unsettling part was yet to come. One location, marked only as the Nexus, kept appearing throughout the ledger. It wasn't a city, a country, or even a known financial center. It was a name that stood apart from the rest. I tried searching for it online, but it yielded no results. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Could it be a code name? A location that didn't officially exist, yet was central to everything? I had to know more. The next night, I found myself sitting in a dingy coffee shop, laptop open in front of me. The glow of the screen illuminated my face, casting long shadows across the table. I had a list of names, coordinates, and a single, elusive clue: the Nexus. I tried every angle, every lead, but nothing came close to explaining what it was. That's when I heard the footsteps. Heavy, measured, slow. I didn't turn around at first, assuming it was just another person making their way to the counter. But the footsteps stopped directly behind me. I froze. A low voice spoke, its tone just above a whisper, but with a weight that pressed down on my chest. "You're looking in the wrong place." I spun around, heart racing. But the figure who had spoken was already gone, vanishing into the crowd before I could react. I stood up, my chair scraping harshly against the floor. My pulse thundered in my ears as I scanned the room. No one was looking at me. No one seemed to notice anything unusual. I checked my phone. No messages. No missed calls. But that voice, it wasn't just a warning. It was a threat. I had to keep going. I had to know what the Nexus was. But now, more than ever, I felt the weight of the danger closing in. There was someone, or something, trying to stop me from uncovering the truth. The threat felt real, palpable, and I knew that every step I took brought me closer to something much larger than I could have anticipated. The mystery of the Nexus was no longer just a curiosity, it had become a challenge. And I wasn't going to back down. But as I gathered my things and stepped out into the night, a single thought echoed in my mind. Was I already too deep? Had I crossed a line that I could never come back from? The days that followed were a blur of tension. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every movement felt calculated. Every step I took, I imagined eyes on me. The stranger's warning, "You're looking in the wrong place," echoed in my mind, and the sensation of being followed became almost unbearable. I knew I was getting closer to the truth, but at what cost? The encrypted ledger had led me deeper into the world of the shadow economy, and the pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together in ways I hadn't anticipated. The Nexus wasn't just a place, it was a network. A hidden society with its roots tangled in the very fabric of global finance, politics, and power. The closer I got to understanding it, the more the pieces began to fall into place. The names I had been tracing weren't just linked by transactions, they were linked by blood. A group of families and elites who had controlled the world's wealth for centuries, operating in the shadows, pulling strings, and manipulating history to maintain their dominance. I had been naive to think that I could expose this without consequences. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened next. I was sitting in my apartment one evening, scrolling through documents when I received an encrypted email. It was from an anonymous source, the same one who had first sent me the ledger. The subject line read, "The Nexus is watching you." I froze. My eyes darted to the window, half expecting to see someone standing in the shadows, waiting. I was alone, but the sensation of being watched intensified. The email contained a single sentence. "Stop digging. They know you're close." The blood drained from my face. For the first time, the full weight of what I was uncovering hit me. This wasn't just about corrupt businesses or government officials. This was an entrenched system, a machine that had been running for generations. The shadow economy was just the tip of the iceberg. It wasn't just about money, it was about control. And it was more powerful than I had ever imagined. I had to know who they were. I started digging deeper into the families behind the transactions, using every resource at my disposal. It didn't take long before I uncovered something that made my stomach twist, a group known only as the Apex. According to old records, the Apex was an exclusive society made up of the wealthiest families in the world. They were the ones who manipulated the global economy, ensuring their control over everything from international banking systems to commodity markets. They were the shadowy figures pulling the strings behind wars, crashes, and the rise and fall of nations. Their influence was so deeply ingrained that even the most powerful governments were nothing more than puppets in their game. But who were they really? And why was I being dragged into their mess? I couldn't stop. I knew I was in too deep, but the truth was too important. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became that the Apex wasn't just some secret society. They were everywhere, hidden in plain sight. They ran governments, corporations, and global organizations. They had their fingers in every pie. The more I learned, the more I realized that the true power of the Nexus wasn't just financial. It was the ability to shape history, to control the very narrative of human civilization. But that power came at a price. I was leaving no stone unturned, and that was beginning to attract attention. I'd been receiving strange phone calls, anonymous letters, and more cryptic warnings. But one call, late one night, made my blood run cold. A familiar voice, low, calm, and deliberate, spoke on the other end. "You've been looking for the Nexus, but you don't know what you're up against." I swallowed hard. "Who is this?" A soft laugh echoed from the speaker. "I'm someone who's seen what happens when people like you dig too deep. If you're smart, you'll stop now. Because once you're in, you can never get out." The line went dead. I sat there in the dark, staring at the phone, my hands trembling. I'd been warned. And yet, the fire that had been lit within me burned brighter than ever. The Nexus wasn't just a story anymore. It was my story. I was too far in, and I knew that I couldn't turn back. I had to finish what I started. But the deeper I dug, the more I felt the weight of something far more dangerous than I had ever imagined, a force far more powerful than the shadow economy itself. They were watching, and they were waiting. And I had no idea just how close I was to stepping into the fire. The weight of the words, "They know you're close," lingered in my mind long after the phone call ended. I had become the hunted. What had once been a story about financial corruption had morphed into something much darker, far more dangerous. I wasn't just uncovering the truth, I was challenging a system, an ancient network, that had existed for centuries. And now, the Nexus was aware of me. The problem was, I didn't know how much they knew. And that made every move I made feel like a gamble. I spent the following days buried in research, flipping through records, decoding more of the ledger, trying to connect the dots that seemed scattered across the world. I pored over historical texts, financial reports, anything I could find that might reveal more about the Nexus, the apex, and the true scale of the power they wielded. It was like piecing together a puzzle that was never meant to be solved. The more I dug, the more I found myself questioning what I had once thought was real. The old financial systems, the governments I'd trusted, the corporations I'd been critical of, they were all part of this web. Every major crisis, every war, every economic collapse, it wasn't random. It was orchestrated. A carefully controlled sequence of events to maintain the status quo, to keep the world in the hands of the few. I kept coming back to the same disturbing thought. If they were really as powerful as I suspected, then how far were they willing to go to protect their secrets? I needed help. But asking for help meant exposing myself even more. I had trusted sources in the past, other journalists, whistleblowers, activists, but the more I reached out, the more I began to notice a pattern. People were pulling away. Slowly, subtly, but unmistakably. It was as if they had been warned to stay out of my way. The emails I sent out went unanswered. Phone calls were ignored. It was clear, I was on my own. Still, I couldn't stop. I reached out to one of the few remaining contacts I had left in the underground world of financial whistleblowing. His name was Greg. We had met years ago when I was working on a different investigation into corporate corruption. He was a former banker who had blown the whistle on some of the biggest financial institutions in the world. We had kept in touch off the record, and I knew he had connections that could help me. The meeting was arranged quickly, but the location was anything but ordinary. Greg had insisted on meeting in a small, rundown diner on the edge of town, far away from any prying eyes. The kind of place where no one would notice two people huddled in the corner booth, whispering over coffee. When I arrived, Greg was already there, sitting in a shadowed corner, his face half hidden by the brim of a baseball cap. He motioned for me to sit. "You've been digging into something much bigger than you realize, haven't you?" His voice was low, cautious. "I know about the Nexus," I said, leaning in. "I've connected some of the dots, but I need to understand who they really are. What they want." Greg looked around nervously before meeting my gaze. "You're in way too deep," he said. "The Nexus isn't just a financial network. It's a global power structure. They control governments, industries, and most of the world's wealth. But it's not just money, it's about control. They don't just influence the world, they shape it. Every major event, every global shift, it's been planned by them for centuries." I felt the blood drain from my face. I had suspected it, but hearing it out loud made the truth sink in deeper. "But why? Why manipulate everything?" Greg hesitated before answering. "Power. They believe they're the only ones who can keep the world in balance. They think they're protecting us, even if it means controlling us. The thing is, once you're in, you can't get out. You become part of the machine." I sat back, my mind racing. "And you're telling me you know how to stop them?" Greg's face tightened. "No one can stop them. They're too powerful. But maybe you can expose them." He slid a small, worn notebook across the table. It was filled with scribbled notes, names, locations, and documents that were almost too much to take in at once. "This is what I've managed to gather over the years. It's not much, but it's a start. It won't give you the full picture, but it might help you understand the true scale of the Nexus." As I flipped through the pages, I saw the names of people I'd never heard of, elite business leaders, politicians, and shadowy figures who existed only in whispers. I didn't know who to trust anymore. My own investigation was becoming a blur of half-formed theories, cryptic messages, and mounting fear. Before I could say anything, Greg stood up abruptly. "You need to leave. Now." "What?" "Trust me," Greg said, his voice barely above a whisper. "They know you're here. You're not safe." I looked around, my heart pounding. The diner, which had felt like a safe haven just moments before, suddenly felt like a trap. I grabbed the notebook, shoved it into my bag, and bolted out of the door. As I ran into the night, the weight of what I had uncovered pressed down on me harder than ever. But the most disturbing thought was still lingering in my mind. Greg had been right about one thing. The deeper I dug, the less control I had. I was now part of something much bigger than myself. And the more I learned, the more I realized I was no longer just a journalist chasing a story. I was a pawn in a game I didn't fully understand. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the faces of the people whose names had appeared in Greg's notebook. Elite names, powerful names, names tied to corporations and governments I had once believed to be pillars of stability. But now, they were nothing more than cogs in a machine that ran the world from the shadows. I couldn't stop thinking about what Greg had said. "Once you're in, you can't get out." It wasn't just a warning, it was a statement of fact. The following morning, I sat at my desk, staring at the documents spread out before me. The notebook had provided more questions than answers, but one thing became painfully clear. I wasn't dealing with just a group of wealthy elites or corrupt business tycoons. The nexus was something far more intricate, more insidious. It wasn't just about money or power, it was about manipulating the very fabric of human society. And it wasn't just a financial network, it was a covert system of control that had infiltrated every aspect of our lives, from the food we ate to the wars we fought. The names and locations in Greg's notebook pointed to global events that had shaken the world. Financial crashes, political upheavals, environmental disasters, all of them had been meticulously planned and controlled by the Nexus. As I sifted through the pages, my eyes were drawn to a series of documents that didn't match the others, documents that appeared to be far older, written in a style that felt ancient. These weren't just business contracts or government memos. They were documents of power, codifying the creation of the Nexus and detailing its origins. My heart raced as I realized what I was looking at. These were the founding documents of the Nexus itself. The more I read, the more I understood that the group wasn't just a product of the modern world. It was a creation of history, born from the ashes of ancient societies that had long since disappeared from the records. The Nexus had been founded centuries ago, in the wake of the fall of empires and the rise of new world orders. It had always existed in one form or another, evolving as the world evolved, pulling the strings of human civilization from the shadows. But what struck me most wasn't just the age of these documents, it was the language they used. They didn't speak of wealth or power in the way we understand it. They spoke of something deeper, more primal, control over time itself. I flipped through the pages, my fingers trembling. The more I read, the more I began to understand what the Nexus had truly been working towards: the complete manipulation of the future. They didn't just want to control the present, they wanted to shape history itself, to dictate the course of human events in such a way that they would always be the ones in power. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became. They had not only manipulated financial systems, but also the very fabric of time, warping the past, present, and future to fit their vision. I sat back, my mind reeling. How was this even possible? Could they really have the power to manipulate history? Could they have been shaping the world in ways I couldn't even begin to comprehend? I had to get more information. I had to find out who else knew about this. But as I sat there, trying to piece together the gravity of what I had uncovered, a single question kept echoing in my mind: what if they're already too powerful to stop? As if on cue, the phone on my desk buzzed, snapping me out of my thoughts. I glanced at the screen. It was a number I didn't recognize. I picked it up, hesitant. "Hello?" I said, my voice tinged with uncertainty. The voice on the other end was calm, almost soothing. "I think you found something you shouldn't have." I froze, the hair on the back of my neck standing up. I recognized the voice instantly. It was the same voice from the phone call weeks ago, the one that had warned me. "You're closer than you think," the voice continued. "But be careful. You've only scratched the surface. The truth is far darker than you realize." The line went dead. I sat there, the phone pressed to my ear, as silence filled the room. My hands were shaking. Whoever this person was, they knew exactly what I was uncovering, and they didn't want me to get any closer. But it was too late. I had already crossed the line. As I leaned back in my chair, the weight of what I had uncovered began to settle in. The Nexus wasn't just an organization, it was a force of nature, an invisible hand that had been shaping the world for centuries. And I had just discovered the first real proof of its existence. But at what cost? My mind raced as I realized the enormity of what I was up against. The deeper I dug, the more I uncovered, the more I felt like I was being pulled into an abyss. This was no longer just about exposing corruption. It was about uncovering a force so powerful that it could destroy everything I knew. The question I had to answer now wasn't just what the Nexus was. It was how far they were willing to go to keep their secrets buried. And I was about to find out. The days were blurring together. Every morning felt the same, endless searching, decoding, and connecting pieces of the puzzle that, no matter how hard I tried, never seemed to fit perfectly. The more I uncovered, the more overwhelming it became. The Nexus wasn't just a system of power. It was a living, breathing entity, one that existed within every layer of society, with tendrils reaching into every facet of human existence. But what did they want? What was the ultimate goal of this secret society? I was no closer to answering that question, and every new lead seemed to pull me further away from the truth, leaving me tangled in a web of hidden connections, half-formed conspiracies, and unseen forces. There were days when I wondered if it was all worth it, if digging deeper into this murky world would ever lead to anything beyond danger and chaos. Then came the breakthrough. It started with a file, one that had been buried deep within the network of encrypted documents I had spent weeks sorting through. At first glance, it looked like nothing more than another financial transaction, but something about it caught my attention. The document was dated nearly a decade ago, but the names listed on it were familiar, too familiar. They were connected to events I had already uncovered, major crises in the financial world and the collapse of a few multinational corporations. The odd thing was, there was no record of this particular transaction in any public database. It was hidden, tucked away as if it had never happened. I dug deeper. The file linked a series of shell companies, some of which had been involved in the most significant financial crimes of the last century. But the trail led somewhere unexpected, a private charity. A non-profit that, on the surface, appeared to do nothing more than fund global relief efforts. But as I pulled at the thread, I realized this organization was far more than it seemed. It wasn't just a charity, it was a front. A front for laundering money, manipulating global economies, and solidifying the power of the Nexus. The deeper I went, the more I uncovered, an intricate network of charities, nonprofits, and corporations all funneling money into the hands of the elites. These were the men and women who controlled the world's wealth and used it to influence everything from political elections to international treaties. They didn't just control wealth, they controlled what the world would see as truth, manipulating entire industries to fit their narrative. But it wasn't just financial control. It was something more sinister. They were shaping society itself. Education, media, healthcare, these weren't just sectors of public service. They were tools, weapons, used to ensure the public stayed complacent. The truth was being systematically hidden, and those who dared to uncover it were silenced. I couldn't believe what I was reading. This was far more than a conspiracy. It was a global system, one that had been operating for generations, invisible to the masses. The Nexus wasn't just a secret economy. It was a cultural, political, and economic machine that had been engineered to preserve the status quo, no matter the cost. The magnitude of the conspiracy was staggering. It wasn't just about wealth anymore. The real power of the Nexus lay in its ability to dictate the future, to manipulate human behavior, to keep everyone in line. I was uncovering not just corruption but the foundation of the world as we knew it, a world built on lies, on false narratives that had been carefully constructed to keep the masses controlled. I couldn't stop. I couldn't let this go. But that's when I began to feel the weight of the danger I was in. The more I uncovered, the more the pieces of the puzzle seemed to fit, the more I realized how exposed I had become. The Nexus wasn't just a network of elites. It was a system of surveillance, one that reached far beyond what I had imagined. It wasn't just the government that was watching, it was the very people who controlled it. And they knew I was close. They knew I was getting too close to the heart of the conspiracy. One night, I was reviewing the documents I had found when my phone rang. It was an unlisted number. I hesitated before picking up. "Don't trust what you're reading," a voice warned. It was a deep, familiar voice, one I hadn't heard in days. I knew immediately who it was. The same voice that had warned me before. "The Nexus is closing in. You have no idea how deep this goes. They'll come for you." The voice continued, its tone tinged with fear. "Stop now, while you still can. There's no escaping them." The line went dead. I sat there, phone still pressed to my ear, my heart pounding in my chest. The walls felt like they were closing in, the reality of the situation crashing down around me. The Nexus wasn't just after me for what I knew. It was after me because they couldn't let anyone expose the truth. I knew I had to keep going. But as I sat there, fear creeping into my bones, I wondered just how far I was willing to go to uncover the truth. And how much I was willing to risk. I had crossed the point of no return. The web I had been unraveling now felt like it was tightening around me, and the more I uncovered, the more I realized that I was no longer just investigating the Nexus. I was part of it. Whether I liked it or not, every step I took deeper into the conspiracy was a step into a world that I could never leave behind. I sat in my apartment, going through Greg's notebook once again. The pages were dog-eared and stained with coffee spills, evidence of how much time I had spent on this investigation. The truth was becoming clearer with each passing day, but at the same time, it was growing more dangerous. The Nexus wasn't just a conspiracy, it was a shadow government, an entity with control over not only finances but also the media, politics, and public perception. It wasn't just about wealth. It was about controlling the narrative of humanity itself. I had come to one disturbing conclusion: the Nexus had its fingers in every part of the world. Nothing was untouched. Political elections? Rigged. Global crises? Manufactured. The world's largest corporations? They were tools, their CEOs nothing more than puppets in the hands of the Apex, the secret group that controlled the shadow economy. This wasn't just about power, it was a philosophical doctrine. The Apex believed that only they had the right to rule, that humanity needed them to thrive. They weren't just controlling the world for profit. They were doing it because they truly believed they were doing what was best for everyone. But it was all a lie. A lie so carefully constructed that no one had ever questioned it. Until now. I was about to make another breakthrough when I felt it. That familiar chill creeping up my spine, that feeling of being watched. I paused, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. The feeling was too strong to ignore. Someone was outside, lurking just beyond the reach of my window. I got up cautiously, moving toward the blinds and peering out. My heart skipped a beat. A car was parked across the street, nothing out of the ordinary. But the two men sitting inside? They were staring directly at my building. I wasn't sure how long they had been there, but I knew one thing for certain: they were watching me. I stepped back, trying to calm my breath. It was happening. The Nexus had caught wind of my investigation, and now they were coming for me. The phone rang, shattering the silence of the room. I didn't recognize the number, but I knew it was them. I picked up, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to sound composed. "You've been digging too deep," the voice on the other end said. It was familiar, but distorted, as if the person had masked their voice. It was a warning, but it felt more like a promise. "We gave you the chance to back out, but now, you're a liability." "Who is this?" I demanded, my pulse racing. "You'll find out soon enough," the voice replied. "But by then, it won't matter. Your time is up." I hung up, my mind spinning. The walls were closing in, and I had no way out. The people behind the Nexus didn't care about the truth. They didn't care about justice. They cared about their control, and they would do anything to maintain it. But what was I supposed to do now? I couldn't go to the authorities. The Nexus had their hands in everything. The police, the government, even the media, they were all puppets, and if I tried to expose them, they would silence me in ways I could never predict. In that moment, I realized just how alone I was. No one could be trusted. The people who had helped me in the past, the sources I had relied on, they were all gone. Either they had been silenced, or they had betrayed me. I thought of Greg, the man who had given me the notebook. What if he had known how deep this went? What if he was a part of it? I had to confront him. I had to know what he was hiding. He had been the one who led me down this path, and now I needed answers. I packed my things, grabbed the notebook, and left the apartment. The car across the street was still there, but now I knew. It was waiting for me. I had become a target, and there was no escaping it. But I couldn't stop now. I had gone too far. If I backed down, I would be just another name erased from history, a casualty of the Nexus. No. I had to confront them. I had to find out who was pulling the strings behind the scenes, and I had to stop them. I pulled out my phone and sent Greg a message, demanding a meeting. The response came almost immediately. "Meet me at the old warehouse on 5th Street, 10 p.m. Don't trust anyone." The message felt cryptic, but I had no choice. If I was going to get to the bottom of this, it had to be done face to face. That night, I made my way to the warehouse, my every step filled with unease. The streets were deserted, the air heavy with the promise of something terrible waiting just beyond the horizon. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking straight into a trap. But I couldn't turn back now. The warehouse on 5th Street was everything you'd expect it to be: desolate, cold, and filled with the thick scent of old wood and rust. The place looked abandoned, its windows boarded up and the metal door slightly ajar. It stood like a relic of the past, untouched by time and forgotten by the world outside. But as I approached, a cold shiver ran down my spine, and I couldn't shake the feeling that this place had seen more than its fair share of dark dealings. It felt wrong, as if the walls themselves were watching, waiting. I checked my watch, 10:05 p.m. I was late, but just by a few minutes. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I fumbled to pull it out. The message was simple, but it was enough to make my stomach churn. "Don't trust Greg." The words felt like a slap to the face, an instant realization that I had been walking straight into a trap. Who sent this message? Was it from Greg warning me? Or had I unknowingly played right into the hands of the Nexus? I had no time to think. The door to the warehouse creaked open, and I slipped inside, the cold air wrapping around me like a shroud. The interior was darker than I had expected, the only light coming from a few flickering bulbs overhead. The place was empty, but the quiet felt oppressive, like something was waiting to spring to life. Greg? I called out, my voice echoing against the hollow walls. No answer. I stepped deeper into the warehouse, my eyes scanning the shadows. My heart pounded in my chest as I moved, the silence of the place making every step feel like it was echoing too loudly. I was on edge, my senses heightened, fully aware that I could be walking into a deadly trap. The moment I stepped into this place, I had sealed my fate. There was no turning back now. And then I heard it. A soft click, followed by the sound of a door sliding shut. I whirled around. Standing in the doorway was Greg, his face hidden in shadow, but his figure unmistakable. I felt a surge of both relief and suspicion. This was it, the moment I'd been waiting for. The answers I needed were finally within reach, but something told me this meeting wasn't going to go the way I imagined. You came, Greg said, his voice low but strangely calm. I wasn't sure if you would. I didn't have much of a choice, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. I need answers, Greg. The Nexus, what is it? Who are they? Greg stepped forward, his face slowly becoming visible in the dim light. But instead of the familiar, reassuring expression I had known, there was something different in his eyes. It was hard to place, but it was the look of someone who had been pushed to their breaking point. You think you want answers, he said softly, his eyes flickering to the shadows behind me. But the truth comes with a price, and you're already too deep to turn back now. I felt a chill in the air. What are you talking about? Greg's expression hardened. You've been following a trail that leads nowhere good. The Nexus, the Apex, they're not just powerful people. They're an idea, an ideal that's older than you can imagine. They've been shaping the world for centuries, controlling everything from wars to economies to even the future itself. What you're uncovering is only the surface. You have no idea how deep this goes. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You've been working with them this whole time, haven't you? I asked, the words bitter on my tongue. You knew everything. Greg shook his head. I didn't want to get involved. I tried to walk away, but it's not that simple. They don't let you leave once you're in. He paused, his eyes flicking to the side. I followed his gaze and saw the faintest glimmer of movement in the shadows. You're not alone in this, Greg continued, his voice shaking slightly. They know you're here, and they won't stop until they've silenced you. Before I could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed in the distance, loud and deliberate. A chill ran through me as the realization hit. Greg wasn't the only one here. Someone else was in the warehouse, and they were closing in fast. The shadows shifted, and suddenly, I was surrounded. Figures emerged from the darkness, their faces hidden by masks, their movements precise and calculated. I recognized one of them immediately, an unmistakable silhouette from the reports I had studied, an enforcer, someone who worked for the Nexus. Greg's expression twisted with guilt. I never wanted you involved in this. But it's too late. They'll make sure you never leave. I backed away slowly, my heart racing, but the figures moved in on me. They were everywhere. I was trapped, cornered, with nowhere to run. You should have listened, Greg said, his voice filled with regret. You shouldn't have kept digging. They're everywhere, and they'll never let you stop. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the sound of my own breath. I knew I had been too reckless, but in that moment, the weight of the choices I had made came crashing down. I had gone too far to turn back now. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. There had to be a way out of this. But as the enforcers moved in, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't just fighting for the truth anymore. I was fighting for my life. I could feel the walls closing in. The cold, metallic scent of fear clung to the air as I backed up further into the corner, the masked figures surrounding me with calculated precision. I had been trapped, cornered, and I knew it. The danger was no longer theoretical. It was real, and it was here. Greg had been right about one thing. I was too deep now. The Nexus wasn't just an organization, it was a force. A machine that operated with ruthless efficiency. A machine that didn't let anyone escape once they got in its gears. And now, I was caught in the center of it. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," one of the enforcers said, his voice cold and emotionless, filtered through the mask. He stepped forward, his posture unwavering, as though the whole situation was already decided. "We've been watching you. We know everything you've uncovered." I could feel the weight of their eyes on me, but I couldn't show fear. I couldn't let them see how much I was shaking inside. There had to be a way out. There had to be a way to turn this around. "Let me go," I said, my voice steady, though I felt the tremor in my hands. I couldn't let them see how afraid I was. "You don't have to do this. I can stop. Just let me leave, and I'll disappear. You won't hear from me again." The enforcer laughed, the sound grating and cold. "You think you have a choice in this? You were never meant to find the truth, but you did. Now you've become a liability, and liability is a problem we eliminate. No one escapes the Nexus." The weight of his words hit me like a hammer. My throat tightened. I had crossed the line, a line that, once crossed, could never be uncrossed. But I refused to give up. I had come too far to be silenced now. I looked around desperately, trying to find something, anything, that could help me escape. My mind raced. I couldn't fight them all. I wasn't prepared for this. But then, my eyes fell on the window, an old, cracked pane of glass in the far corner of the warehouse. It was small, but it was a chance. A way out. In that split second, I knew what I had to do. I couldn't waste any more time. I couldn't wait for the perfect moment. I had to take it. Without thinking, I lunged toward the nearest figure, knocking the flashlight out of his hands. The impact sent him off balance, and in that instant, I dove toward the window. My heart pounded in my ears as I threw my body against the glass, feeling the sharp sting of broken glass against my skin as I crawled through. Pain shot through me, scrapes and cuts from the broken glass, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. My survival instinct had kicked in, and I wasn't going to let it go. I threw myself out of the window, landing on the hard ground outside with a grunt. My body ached, my vision blurred from the impact, but I pushed myself up, every fiber of my being screaming at me to run. I heard the shouts from inside the warehouse, the figures pounding toward the exit. But I didn't look back. I ran as fast as I could, my legs burning, the cold air cutting through my lungs. The city streets were empty at this hour, and I darted between alleyways, my breath ragged, heart racing. I couldn't let them catch me. I couldn't let them silence me. As I rounded a corner, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, my hands shaking as I checked the screen. It was a message from an unknown number. The text read, "You can run, but you can't hide. We'll always find you." I threw the phone into a nearby trash can, the weight of the message sinking in. The Nexus wasn't just after me, they were always watching. They always knew where I was. There was no escaping them. But I wasn't going to give up. I wasn't going to run and hide for the rest of my life. I had uncovered too much. The truth was too important. I didn't care if they were going to come after me. I would expose them, no matter the cost. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stop. The world needed to know what I had uncovered. The truth about the Nexus, about how they had shaped every aspect of our lives. I couldn't let them get away with it. I wasn't just a journalist anymore. I was the last line of defense against the lies they had woven for centuries. And I wasn't going to let them win. I had no idea where I was going. The world had become a blur, the streets unfamiliar, the faces I passed unnoticed. I had lost track of time, lost track of everything except the constant pulse in my veins, the adrenaline pumping through my body, driving me forward. They were still after me. I knew it. The Nexus didn't let anyone escape. Once you knew what they were capable of, there was no turning back. The weight of the situation pressed down on me, but so did something else, the growing sense of purpose. I wasn't just running anymore. I was fighting for the truth. The secrets I had uncovered, about the Nexus, about the Apex, were too important to be buried. It wasn't just about exposing corruption or fraud. This was about the future. It was about revealing the puppet strings that controlled the world. I had no choice. I had to keep going. My first stop was the only safe place I could think of, the small, run-down apartment I had kept hidden for years, far from the public eye. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Here, I had spent countless nights studying, writing, and now, it was where I would make my stand. If I was going to expose the Nexus, I would need to gather every scrap of evidence I had. Every document, every video, every piece of the puzzle that had led me to this point. I quickly set to work, frantically scanning through the files I had managed to download before fleeing the warehouse. The Nexus had tried to stop me, but they had underestimated me. They had underestimated how much I wanted the truth to come out. I was going to expose them, even if it cost me everything. But as I pulled up the files, a thought flickered in my mind. Was this really the right thing to do? I had uncovered the truth, but was anyone even ready for it? What would happen if the world knew about the Nexus? Would they accept it, or would they reject it, like so many other inconvenient truths before it? And then there was the question I couldn't stop asking myself: what would I lose in the process? I had already lost so much. Friends. My sense of safety. My anonymity. I was no longer the reporter who dug into stories from a safe distance. I had crossed the line, and now there was no going back. But what about the people I loved? What about my family? Would they be next? Would they be dragged into this nightmare because of the choices I had made? I stood up, pacing the room, my thoughts spiraling. I was caught between two worlds. The world of the truth, no matter how ugly, no matter how dangerous, and the world of silence, the world where I could let the lies continue, where I could protect myself and the people I loved by turning my back on everything I had uncovered. And then it hit me. The very reason I had gotten involved in this mess, the reason I had spent days, weeks, risking my life, my reputation, was because of the truth. The world needed to know. The people needed to know that the system they thought they understood was a lie. That the institutions they trusted were just tools in the hands of a hidden few. But who would believe me? What could I possibly show that would convince the world to act? I was interrupted by the sharp ring of my phone, pulling me out of my thoughts. My heart stopped in my chest. It was a private number, one I didn't recognize. I knew who it was before I even answered. "Hello?" I asked, my voice steady but tense. "Is it done?" the voice on the other end asked. It was Greg's voice, but it sounded hollow, detached. "Greg? What's going on? Why are you—" "Listen to me carefully." Greg cut me off. "You need to leave. Now. The Nexus knows everything. They've been tracking you for days. You're no longer safe." I felt my stomach churn. "I'm not running anymore. I'm going to expose them." Greg sighed heavily. "You think it's that simple? You think the truth will set you free? It won't. They'll bury you before you even get the chance to speak. You need to disappear. Go somewhere no one can find you, and forget everything you know." I shook my head, frustration boiling over. "You don't understand. I can't let them win. The truth isn't what you think it is," Greg said, his voice quieter now. "The Nexus, it's not just a group of elites. They're part of something much bigger. Something older than both of us. You're in over your head." I gripped the phone tighter, the words ringing in my ears. What was Greg not telling me? What was this thing, this Nexus, really? I could hear the urgency in his voice, and I knew he wasn't lying. But I couldn't back down. Not now. Not after everything. I don't care what they are, I said firmly. I'm going to stop them. There was a long pause before Greg responded. Then you've made your choice. But don't say I didn't warn you. The line went dead. I stared at the phone for a moment, my chest tightening. The choice had been made. There was no going back. I knew now what I had to do. The truth had to come out. No matter what it cost me. It wasn't just about exposing the nexus. It was about taking control of my own future, about ensuring that this hidden world of power and manipulation didn't continue to run unchecked. I turned away from the desk, my eyes fixed on the door. The world outside was waiting. The truth needed to be heard. And I was going to make sure it was.